It's no secret that when many of you stumbled upon my channel over 2 years ago, my appearance was drastically different from what you see today. The camera inadvertently documented a transformation that not many people have a chance to witness in real time, let alone share it. It's a strange experience to have an audience of eyes on you during such a personal journey, something impossible to conceal. But I suppose that's what happens when you become a public figure. As I reflect on it, I can't help but feel compelled to address what essentially became a public event. A journey I wasn't sure how to navigate as it unfolded. Consider it a cautionary tale for those who still have the opportunity to change the course of their lives. I want to share what it was like to live trapped in my own body and mind. A battle I fought and nearly lost. I won't sugarcoat this narrative. It is what it is. I'm also sharing this because I want to, and not because I feel pressure from anybody. These are just short, key highlights from my life, as writing all in detail would probably be enough to write a book. If you're uncomfortable hearing about these experiences, feel free to check out any of my other videos that's sure to bring a smile to your face with a lighter content. But if you like to watch the painting process of this girl, you can simply mute the video and play some music in the background. However, please note that there may be some personal images throughout the presentation. I won't be offended if you choose this option. Just leave a like and maybe consider subscribing. Okay, thanks! I've also released a detailed explanation of my process for working on kits, featuring Yoko from Gurren Lagann and Komi from Komi Can Communicate. If you're curious about anything I do here, you can always check out those videos to see my process, since it's quite similar for all my figures. With that said, this is my story. Many people grapple with obesity for various reasons, such as eating disorders, but I fall into a different category. I never had a food addiction. Instead, I faced psychological and emotional trauma, primarily due to my father. My childhood was marred by a father who was physically and emotionally abusive, wreaking havoc not only on my life, but also on my mother and sisters. I witnessed and experienced many things that no child should ever have to go through, thanks to an undiagnosed neurotic man. We became survivors of domestic violence as the nightmare mercifully ended when my mother divorced him when I was 15. I never saw him again after that, but the damage he inflicted lingered through most of my life. Because of him, I developed childhood anxiety. The mere thought of encountering him filled me with dread. When he wasn't around during the day, life was peaceful and I was happy. But as soon as he came back from work, and especially on the weekends, I'd sit around in fear, attempting not to provoke his anger and becoming the target of his momentary frustrations. We lived in a low-income household with no snacks or candy, but there was always food in the fridge. So whenever I had an anxiety attack, which I didn't realize I was experiencing, I'd head over to the pantry or the fridge and grab anything, something, whatever I could find to eat. It didn't matter what I had eaten for breakfast or lunch. I'd grab a piece of bread with butter or even eat raw hot dogs. Sometimes my mom would make some desserts, and she kept a stash of condensed milk in the pantry. I'd end up eating half a can, only for her to discover it later and ground me for it. Gradually, I began gaining weight when I was just 7 years old, and as the pounds piled on, I became the target of relentless bullying at school due to my appearance. And I felt so isolated by everyone around me. Kids are cruel little fuckers, and I'm convinced of it. When it came to physical education, I became the subject of ridicule because I couldn't keep up with the teacher's assigned laps. My classmates would mockingly gesture with circular motions using their arms, puff their cheeks, and point at me. This class became a dreaded nightmare for me, and it fueled both my disdain for school and my peers. As a result, my grades consistently hovered around mediocrity or barely passing. Every time report cards came out, panic attacks would consume me because I knew my father would express his disapproval with his belt, showing absolutely no restraint. Home was just as miserable as school. I hated being told to exercise because of all the constant humiliation for not being able to last as long as the other kids. I also started to develop earlier than other girls. So the bullying got worse. It made me ashamed of my body because the other girls would point at my chest and laugh. And as I mentioned in my previous Storytime video, my mother's Catholic upbringing meant that I never received quote-unquote the talk. When I got my first period at the age of 11, my mother simply said, "Use a pad," with no explanation beyond, "This will happen every month now." I felt constantly dirty, enduring excruciating pain without any medication and not understanding why I was in so much pain and why me. My relationship with my body during these formative years never took a positive turn. I began despising my body at a very young age, and my self-esteem never truly developed. I constantly compared myself to other girls my age and felt utterly worthless. Growing up in a Latin American country like Mexico only exasperated my struggles. The culture here often boils down to, if you're fat, you're ugly. People are quick to point out your weight, regardless of age. Adults will denigrate you based on your appearance and even assign you cute nicknames related to your physical attributes. In my case, I was called Fatso by family members when I was just a child. To them, it was endearing and harmless, but I detested it then and I still do today. This aspect of Mexican culture desperately needs to change. We're nowhere near as politically correct as the US, and it was even worse 30 years ago. This environment did me no favors. Family members, despite their intentions, often acted in ways that did me more harm than good. When I mentioned being bullied, their advice was simply to fight back, but they never went to school to speak with teachers. If my clothes no longer fit, they'd buy me larger sizes and then force me to exercise with aerobic VHS tapes featuring super fit girls on TV. When I couldn't keep up, they'd tell me to push harder, as if that would motivate me, but all it did was just intensify my self-loathing. I was already comparing myself to other girls and thinking, I'm just a worthless piece of shit. My father even had a morbidly obese cousin, and they often used her as an example of what would happen to me if I continued eating. In my mind, being fat equated to being unlovable from a very young age, and that belief clung to me until adulthood. My mental health as a child was in a dire state, with virtually no self-esteem or confidence. The combination of abuse at home, the bullying at school, and forced exercises in both places led me to despise myself and loathe any physical activity that didn't involve escaping on my bike to get away from home when father was around. In moments of anxiety, I'd secretly eat anything I could find. Even though I wasn't giving any school lunch money, I somehow managed to save a few cents here and there to buy treats. Sugar provided a temporary escape, and those few moments of indulgence helped me forget about my father and the bullies. While we were a low-income household, my parents still owned our home, and there was always food on the table. However, our diet consisted of whatever we could afford, which often meant greasy, carbohydrated heavy foods. Healthy eating wasn't a priority, particularly in Mexico, where tortillas or loaves of baked bread were staples at every meal. We didn't just eat one tortilla, we ate as many as we wanted. Mexican food, which is essentially just food here, can be very unhealthy, with frequent consumption of fried items and excessive grease, combined with daily servings of soda. Yes, it is true, Mexico is one of the world's top consumer of Coca-Cola, no denying that. Everything in my life seemed to set me up for perpetual failure. This failure continued to affect me even today. When I entered my teenage years, my parents divorced, and I thought I'd finally find peace at home since I wouldn't be beaten anymore. However, my school life remained unchanged. I can't fathom what it was about me that made my classmates bully me incessantly. Even after I entered junior high, the only difference was that I had learned how to achieve good grades. I went from barely passing in primary school to becoming the top student in my class in junior high, and suddenly everyone wanted to be my friend. But my quiet demeanor and keen observation had taught me to see right through their bullshit. They wanted to befriend me so that they could copy my test answers or share my homework, which I refused to do. Apparently, I wasn't being a team player, and I needed to be taught a new lesson. I always questioned why me when there were other overweight girls in my class. The attention always seemed to be on me, whether it was calling me a cow with big udders due to the large breasts that I had managed to grow, or simply excluding me from socializing with anyone. Physical education remained a nightmare, so I began skipping those classes altogether. The teacher didn't really care if you attended, everyone received the same grade, and I despised the motherfucker even more because he would mock me by calling me a name of a popular Mexican TV clown commentary character with curly hair, because mine was as curly as his, which only fueled further name-calling. I couldn't catch a break. I resigned myself to being a loner at that point. When exercise proved ineffective, I was subjected to diets at a very young age. I wasn't even 13 yet, and I was placed on extreme plans like Slim Fast. These diets involved me being fed nothing but canned tuna with green beans while I watched the rest of my family enjoy steak for dinner. It was torture. And although I did manage to shed some weight on those diets, I detested every minute of them. Unfortunately, as soon as I stopped these diets, I would begin eating again, and I would inevitably regain whatever I had lost, and often more. It became an endless cycle. Start a diet, lose some weight, hit a plateau, stop the diet, get depressed, start eating again, and watch the weight go back up. Diets to me became synonymous with failure. I was mentally preparing myself to accept the life of being overweight and miserable. However, something changed on my 16th birthday. My sister approached me and offered to pay for a diet plan from a so-called nutritionist that helped her shed significant amount of weight. My sister and I shared similar struggles. But the key difference between us was that she enjoyed exercising, which allowed her to lose weight, but had a hard time keeping it off. When I saw how skinny she had become with this nutritionist, it piqued my interest. She assured me that I wouldn't need to exercise, which excited me. However, in the same breath, she warned me that if I didn't lose weight, she would stop buying anything for me because the plan was quite expensive. To feel pressure because of this was an understatement. My sister took me to this nutritionist who gave me a cursory look, inquired about my eating habits, and then handed me a diet plan. He instructed me to follow it and return every week for a weigh-in. To my surprise, he also provided me with a doctor's note along with a prescription. I had no idea that I would need to take any type of medication, but my sister assured me that these were magic pills and that they would help me lose weight. I didn't question it. I trusted the adults in my life, so I began taking them. It wasn't until many years later that I learned what those pills were. I had been prescribed amphetamines at just 16 years old. These pills guaranteed weight loss, but that came with a heavy cost, which I wouldn't pay until later in my adult life. The nutritionist then asked me to step on the scale, and that's when I came face to face with my true weight. I weighed in at 110 kilos and 165 centimeters tall, which made me obese. It was a shocking revelation, but I was determined to address it, so I tried to not be traumatized by that number as I saw it for the first time. I took my sister's warning seriously and stayed on that diet that I was given. I took the pills that I was told to take, and I went for a weigh-in every week. To my surprise and astonishment, the weight started to melt away. Every week, I was down 1.5 kilos, constantly shedding pant size one after the other. I wasn't even doing any exercise, which I loved, and all thanks to those magical pills. I went from avoiding looking myself in the mirror to finally seeing myself in a long time. I lost 32 kilos in the span of 6 months and developed self-esteem for the first time in my life. The feeling of liking myself was so strange to me, but it made me the happiest I've ever been. I was on cloud fucking 9 and enjoying every second of it. Putting on clothes that fit and looked good on me was a joy I had never experienced. I took every chance to look at my reflection while I was walking on the streets. It was an amazing feeling. However, with my newly found happiness, I came to realize that there was a dark side to being normal, and that was getting attention that I never knew I would attract. When you're overweight, it's like you're invisible. Nobody pays attention to you and nobody cares about you. You're set aside by society, especially here in the Hispanic culture. But if you're young and skinny, all of a sudden, everybody looks at you and everybody wants to be your friend. Classmates who used to bully me wanted to get close, but I honestly kicked them to the curb because it wasn't even a year before they were calling me names and hiding my backpack at school. So I pretty much told them to fuck off, only to be told that I was a stuck-up bitch. It didn't matter that I was skinny because I was now being ostracized for a completely different reason. I don't easily forgive someone that's done me wrong. People were nice to me at the convenience store, opening doors for me at places, but it wasn't something I wanted. Walking down the street to catch the bus to school, I would start to get catcalled and even sexually harassed by middle-aged men. I would try really hard to ignore them, but some even started to follow me. It scared me and it made me feel extremely dirty. Trauma from my early childhood started to surface. When I was a little girl, I was nearly sexually molested by a friend of the family. The guy came close to actually harming me and my sister, but I managed to gather the courage to tell my mother. I asked her to please stop making us see this fucking pedo, and told her what he had tried to do to me. She was understandably royally pissed off and immediately cut contact with this creep. But the damage was done. The little innocence I had disappeared. Getting catcalled and harassed only made me feel unsafe. Nobody told me that losing weight would force me to live through more trauma while actively trying to live in the happiness I've always wanted. It was around this time when I started to date Dick, the guy from a previous Storytime video. So my anxiety over my new looks and safety was set aside thanks to the huge dopamine rush from being in love. And if you'd like to know what happened to me during my time with this Dick, I would recommend you check out that video after this one to get more context. After I left home, my eating habits turned to basically eating whatever I could afford, barely scraping by and eating junk food because it was the only thing I could really buy. All the weight that I had lost slowly came back after a year and a half. Not only did it all come back, I gained even more weight and was at my biggest at a size 16. My old self came back along with it. I went from having a healthy self-esteem and confidence to nearly zero, going back to not looking at myself in the mirror and thinking I was a piece of shit. But hey, at least I was in a relationship, right? Oh my God. At the beginning when I left, I mentioned I had found my first job at a local amusement park. The park closed at 10 every night, and I had to walk back to the place I was staying alone because public transportation stopped working around that time. There were nights where men would honk at me and even stop to try and talk to me. A barely 17-year-old girl. I had panic attacks and would end up running into any establishment that was open and hide. It was so bad that I had to get pepper spray to keep with me. It was horrible, but it was all worth it because true love, am I right? But as soon as I gained all the weight back, all of a sudden, I was invisible again. Everybody went back to ignoring me, and society as a whole looked down on me. But at least I wasn't being harassed on the streets anymore, and I could walk again without being catcalled or afraid somebody would do something to me. Nobody wants a fat girl anyway. Well, that gave me peace of mind. Something else was brewing inside. Having tasted that sweet, sweet self-esteem left my psyche in an interesting place. While I got heavier and my pant size grew bigger, my internal self-image was that of a thin girl. I developed what you could call reverse body dysmorphia. I was thinking to myself, I'm not that big. I mean, I still have my old clothes in the closet. I'll be able to use them again soon. I simply thought that my overweight self was just temporary, so I ignored it. My mental state was so fragile that it could shatter at any time if I saw myself in the mirror. Thus, I avoided it. I also avoided my reflection in any glass window on the street, and I would hide from having my picture taken at all costs. Seeing myself would force me to accept the reality that I was no longer thin, and I couldn't do it. I went back to dieting on and off, losing some weight, hitting a plateau, getting depressed, and then eating again. It was a never-ending vicious circle. I didn't have those magic pills with me anymore because you needed a prescription to buy them, and the guy I went to was not cheap, so I couldn't afford it. And when I wasn't seeing the fast results I saw before, I would just simply give up on myself and let go even more. Every time I had to go buy new clothes, I'd grab what I thought was my size, then go and try them out, only to realize that they were 2 sizes too small. Those pants that used to be size 16 had stretched so much that I was now an 18, bordering on 20. It never failed every single time. I would find clothing that fit, but it was just horrible and ugly as hell. You don't need to be a size 18 and have your ass fully decorated with rhinestones and glitter. So it was doubly depressing to not fit into the clothes that you like and finding the ones that did, but they were ugly as donkey ass. I always ended up leaving the clothing store empty-handed and in tears. I preferred to just wear graphic tees and some generic stretch denim jeans I could find by chance. But I never looked presentable. I was dressing to just cover myself. It was miserable, and I was torturing myself by taking out that little black dress that everyone has that I wore one night and putting it in front of me and thinking to myself, I was this small? I would cry and then put it away for another day to repeat the same thing. I was working at a call center and every day was simply dreadful. Dealing with abusive shits on the phone, unable to respond, started to take a toll on my nervous system. I even developed hives on my elbows due to the immense stress. Then one day, I had enough. I found myself in a screaming showdown with an insufferable person on the other side of the phone, and then the supervisor in charge came over, adding to the cacophony. It felt like 2 people screaming at me simultaneously. In sheer frustration, I abruptly stood up and flung my headset away, only to feel half my body tingling and my breath started to turn very rapid. It was so severe that I collapsed into my chair, telling the supervisor that I wasn't feeling well and to shut it. Witnessing this, a couple of coworkers rushed over to help. They guided me to the infirmary, where the nurse checked my vitals. She sat me down and inquired about my work. Clearly, she was accustomed to seeing the toll it took on people at call centers, hence the presence of a nurse around the clock. I poured all my stress onto her, and she simply listened. In the end, she said, "Your blood pressure is 160/90. Do you realize that these are the signs of hypertension?" I was stunned. Hypertension? At 24? I couldn't believe it. I said, "No, I'm too young for that." She looked at me and said, "Either you learn to take it easy with the calls, or you need to quit, because this is the nature of this field." Right there and then I said, "Where the fuck do I sign my resignation?" I had been working at a call center for 4.5 years, and I just couldn't take it anymore. I quit and continued working with my second job as an English teacher, which didn't pay as much, but it was enough to get by. I honestly never went to the doctor. It's a common tale that if you see a general practitioner for anything, the first thing they mention is your weight. I simply didn't want to deal with it. I disregarded the nurse's advice to get diagnosed for hypertension because I'd need medication if I had it. I felt great after I quit, so I didn't think it was that important. Boy, was I wrong. After I broke up with Dick, the little self-esteem I had disappeared entirely. I wasn't happy, but I wore a mask to show that I was. Around this time, I started to hang out with a group of new friends. While we did have a lot of fun, I couldn't shake the thought that they must think I'm disgusting because I was so overweight. So I started acting in ways I never thought I'd be capable of. You remember the scene in Game of Thrones where Tyrion Lannister meets Jon Snow for the first time, and Jon says he's never going to be anything but a bastard? Tyrion tells him to wear it like armor, so it can never hurt him. That's exactly what I started doing. After a lifetime of bullying because of my weight, I began to self-deprecate, trying to be the funny fat girl in the group. I'd say things like, "Oh, you know me, I'm just a big fat whale." Or, "I may not be thin, but at least I've got huge titties." I thought that if I said these things first, people wouldn't bother to say it because I was self-aware and jolly about it. I never realized back then that my friends didn't think of me that way. And all it did was make them very uncomfortable. Slowly, they stopped visiting and talking to me. I was so hurt. I basically built a wall around me, and I didn't let anyone near me for a long time after that. Making friends was still foreign to me. It was scary to put myself out there to meet new people. It was just easier to self-isolate by having a permanent resting bitch face so nobody would get near me. I regret a lot of things I did to try and get some sort of validation. Something that would tell me that I was worth something. Anyone who showed me even the slightest bit of interest from the opposite sex, I'd take it, regardless of whether it turned into a relationship. I was trying to build my self-worth by being with anybody who would want me. It's a horrible feeling thinking, I'm a piece of shit, but if this guy wants me, then it must mean that I have some value, right? Dick did a lot of damage to me. So I was like a wounded deer seeking refuge in the arms of anybody who would offer it. It wasn't good for my mental and emotional health, but I was alone, and I didn't feel like I had anybody to lean on, not even family. I just stopped caring. My mental state had been in shambles for years at that point. There hadn't been a single day in my life where I didn't think about my weight. No matter what I was doing, whether I was with someone or walking down the street, my weight was a constant thought in my mind. It was exhausting. I wasn't ever happy. I didn't live in the moment. I reduced myself to just existing, but existing in misery, trapped by my mind. Some people find motivation and even inspiration in watching others overcome their struggles, but I was not one of them. Every time I'd see my sisters, my friends, or people on TV lose weight, I'd silently hope they'd fail and gain all the weight back. I was jealous of their success, regardless of how long or short it lasted. This toxic mindset only worsened my own sense of failure, thinking, why can't I just be like them? It made me bitter, so while I said, "That's great, you look good," inside I was thinking, I hope you get fat again so I won't have to be alone in my suffering. The analogy of crabs in a bucket comes to my mind. If I can't be happy for myself, I wasn't going to be for someone else. It wasn't a healthy way to live, and I recognize that now after many years. They say everybody has their rock bottom, the one thing that makes them see how bad they've gone and gives them the push to turn back. But it hadn't come for me. My lifelong dream of going to Japan was realized in 2015. When I arrived, I wasn't prepared for the amount of walking required. It was a shock to me. I thought I could just grab taxis, but it turned out to be easier, faster, and cheaper to take trains. And for that, you had to walk. I got tired really fast every day. I couldn't do all the things I wanted to do or see. My back would hurt, my feet would hurt, everything hurt, and everything felt too small for me. Imagine barely fitting into a Japanese shower without getting stuck. It was embarrassing. I went to Wonder Festival thinking I could see everything at the event, but just 2 hours in, I was done. There I was, standing in what was considered the mecca of this hobby, something I've dreamed of attending for a good decade, and when I was there, I wanted to do so much, but my body just couldn't handle it. I was in pain and angry at myself for not being able to fully enjoy it. There was even a moment when I looked for an area where there were no booths or anything near me for a good 20 meters. I just sat on the floor against the wall. A Japanese girl walked in front of me, stopped, took out her iPad, and pointed it at me. I was confused. Did I see it on a sign or am I in the way? No, she was taking a picture of me. In pain, sitting on the cold floor next to all the bags of the kits that I had purchased. This girl didn't even hide the fact that she was amazed that not only a foreigner was there, but also that I was probably the fattest person she had ever seen. And she just had to take a picture of that. I was confused back then, but remembering it now, it royally pisses me off. Fucking rude ass bitch. Privacy laws and politeness seem to go straight out the window when it comes to a foreigner, right? But my worst moment there was when we visited Osaka Castle. The plan was to go inside and take pictures, but what I didn't realize was that to get there, you would need to climb the equivalent of 10 flights of stairs to reach the top. I went with my boyfriend and a friend who was our tour guide. I barely got to the second flight before I was out of breath, asking them to wait for me. It was super embarrassing. On my second request for a chance to catch my breath halfway, I saw an old man jogging up the stairs as if nothing was holding him back, not even the wind. I felt so humiliated seeing that. Here I was, young and strong, and I was being outpaced by an old man. When I finally reached the last flight of stairs, I saw the same old man going down. And when we finally got to the top, this guy was catching up to his second round. I wanted to be swallowed whole by the earth. It was the worst embarrassment of my trip. I felt horrible for the remainder of my stay. I would never forget that moment, not even to this day. I regret that my weight prevented me from fully enjoying my dream trip to Japan. You'd think that that'd be my moment of realization, but it was far from it. When I took my boyfriend to Universal Studios for his birthday, it had been years since I'd gone, and I was excited to be there and have fun, especially because the new Harry Potter ride had just opened. I eagerly got in line, but as time passed, I started to get tired. My back started to ache. Despite the discomfort, I was determined to ride the fucker. We spent a good 2 hours slowly inching towards the line, and when we finally got there and tried to secure the restraint, it didn't click into place. The ride attendants approached me and awkwardly tried to put the restraint down, knowing well enough it wouldn't. They tried to make the restraint click, but it wouldn't budge, and they asked me to step off as they couldn't allow me back without the restraints securing. I told my boyfriend to go ahead without me, but he refused and got off with me. To say that it was the most humiliating experience of my life is an understatement. It was even worse than what happened in Japan. When you're told to get off a ride, everybody's attention turns to you because you're the reason the train isn't moving. I was escorted outside through the back, and the only people walking with me were other overweight individuals, all experiencing the same walk of shame. As we emerged outside, I told my boyfriend that I needed to go to the bathroom, and I ran off crying. Being escorted out like cattle with the rest of the overweight people made me realize that I needed to change, because I never wanted to live through that ever again. My sister, the same one who had offered to pay for that so-called nutritionist, told me about a new medical procedure for weight loss. It was an alternative to getting a gastric sleeve with minimal risks because they would perform it all through your arteries. It was called a gastric embolization, and what it did was cauterize the arteries in your stomach that produced a hunger hormone, so you wouldn't feel hungry and you would need to eat. I decided to go for it, but I was extremely afraid because I had never undergone any type of medical intervention in my life. When they weighed me, I was told that I was at an unhealthy 145 kilos at a size 22, bordering on 24. I was declared morbidly obese. And the feeling I got from hearing that, well, picture that old clip of that fat guy being hit with a huge cannonball in the gut. That's how it felt. It was horrible. At that point, I was informed that my weight had caused me to have hypertension. So now I had high blood pressure. On top of that, I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism, which kind of explained why it was so hard to lose weight. I later found out it was partly due to the amphetamines I had taken when I was younger. That check was cashed at that point. To add to the mix, I was also told that I was pre-diabetic. But even after being given all this information, I went into denial. How could I have all these illnesses? I'm young. Only old people have these problems. Reality is a very hard pill to swallow. With this new information, I decided to undergo this very expensive procedure in the hopes to finally losing weight. It did work for a few months. I lost 20 kilos, but then it stopped entirely. I tried my hardest to follow the indication and the nutritional plan I was given, but 6 months in and I hadn't lost any more. I felt like a massive failure, the biggest I have felt up to that point, and I sank into depression once more. It was then that I realized that I needed professional help, so I embarked on a long overdue journey of therapy. My therapist helped me realize that the fears stemming from the trauma of being harassed and nearly abused were at the root of my issues, on top of childhood trauma. So I forced myself out of my comfort zone and decided to go to the gym for the first time in my life. However, all that did was give me panic attacks the moment I stepped in. Being the only overweight person in the gym, surrounded by super fit individuals, was extremely intimidating. I felt judged and stared at, even though nobody actually bothered me. I felt extra self-conscious on top of everything else. I tried my best to ignore the people around me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that everybody was just disgusted by me. I would return home in the worst possible mood and just sank furthermore into depression. I had no idea what I was doing at the gym. I didn't even know where to start. I noticed personal trainers instructing people, particularly girls, on what to do. The gym offered me a free week with a personal trainer, but I entirely declined. I hated being told what to do. The trauma from associating exercise with embarrassment had resurfaced. I didn't want anybody telling me what to do or how to do it, and I certainly didn't want to hear the "do it harder" phrase, so I asked on my social media if anybody knew of a trainer who could understand my situation and not push me to do things I wasn't comfortable doing. A friend messaged me and they recommended an app that offered free routines and in-app videos on how to do the exercises. I managed to force myself to use it for about a month, still having no idea on what I was doing, but at least I was doing something. They say it takes a person 60 days to create a habit, and I had been going to the gym for 40 days at that point. Then out of nowhere, we were told to vacate the house we were renting. So I had to stop going to the gym, find a new place, pack everything, move, and then unpack again. We all know that moving house turns your world upside down, but secretly, I was happy to stop going to the gym. I had lost 5 kilos and I just felt a little bit better, though still far from healthy. We moved, settled down, and a few months later, I weighed myself again. I had gone back up to 130 kilos, a 5-kilo increase, and I just gave up. I retreated back to just existing and drifting without any clear direction. The only thing that really kept me afloat and brought me some semblance of happiness was working on resin kits. Working on my figures always made me focus on something other than myself for that moment. For the small amount of time that my hands are busy, I forget the world exists, but even that has its limitations. Time seemed to just stand still for a good 2 years, during which I continued with therapy but didn't make much progress on what really needed it. After changing therapists for the 3rd time, I managed to get back on track and decided to try and go back to the gym, despite the panic attacks induced by just stepping inside one. I resumed my gym routine and kept a close eye on my nutrition and portion control, similar to how I'd been doing after the gastric embolization. I wasn't experiencing hunger, so it was still working. I pushed myself to restart the journey, and it was working. I had been going to the gym 5 days a week and I had lost 8 kilos, bringing my weight back down to 122. I was very happy to see the progress on my own, but then...
Like the cause of the mysterious new virus.
Coronavirus.
Coronavirus.
The pandemic hit and I hit another wall. Everything closed down. There was seemingly nothing I could do. I felt like I was drowning. Like everything was against me, even when I finally wanted to make a real change. It couldn't have come at a worse time. I think we all felt that way. But now I had the fear of catching the virus and potentially dying because being overweight was one of the key factors in people passing away from it. The only thing that kept me going during this time was taking care of a group of stray cats that would come daily to eat. I was happy to have them here. Throughout my life, I had rescued kitties and placed them in loving homes. So I was thinking of doing the same for one of the strays that was really friendly. But one day, we woke up and found him barely alive in our garden. It seems someone had run over or hit him. He was on the brink of death. I panicked and we rushed him to the nearest vet. They managed to stabilize him, but I wanted to keep an eye on the poor thing. So I brought him home. After the second day of seeing how he progressed, I noticed his skin turned yellow, indicating jaundice. I rushed him back to the vet, and after some tests, they detected feline peritonitis. There was no actual cure, just treatment, and they were quite expensive. For months we took care of him, taking him to the vet for treatment every week. But one morning, he took a turn for the worse and was completely unresponsive. I can't bear to see an animal suffer, and this incident pushed me over the edge. I rushed him again to the vet, crying and pleading with them to please help him in any way they could. A few hours later, I received a call. They told me he passed away from a heart attack. I lost it. I became hysterical. Suddenly, I felt an excruciating rush of pain from the bottom of my neck going into my head. It felt like it was going to literally explode from extreme pressure, so much that I dropped my phone. The pain was unbearable, far worse than my worst migraine. On a scale of 1 to 10, it was a 12. I had suffered from extreme migraines before, but this was even more severe. I had never been more scared in my life, while at the same time grasping and trying to understand what was happening to me. At the height of the pandemic, I ended up in the hospital for a week. Nobody could figure out what was wrong, except that I was in excruciating pain 24/7. After numerous tests and consultations with specialists where the only one seemingly missing was Dr. House, I ended up having a very traumatic lumbar puncture, and I was diagnosed with idiopathic intracranial hypertension. On top of that, my blood pressure was at 190 over 120, borderline heart attack territory that miraculously didn't happen. My blood pressure glucose levels were at 245. I was now a diabetic, and it was a miracle that I hadn't fallen into a diabetic coma. All this at just 35 years of age. My whole world came crashing down at that moment. This was my rock bottom, but it was too late. When I started to see specialists, they told me that I was a great candidate for a gastric bypass to help me lose weight. They made it clear that it would be an uphill battle with little success because of my diabetes, hypothyroidism, on top of my PCOS, which apparently I had since childhood. In the best case scenario, I could lose my eyesight, and in the worst case, an aneurysm due to my idiopathic intracranial hypertension, or even death from a heart attack if I wasn't careful with my blood pressure. I had everything working against me, and being confronted with my mortality forced me to finally see my reality. I could hear it for the first time, the voice inside my head. It was screaming and crying. Depression has a funny way of manifesting itself inside my mind. I told them I'd think about it. I had seen close family members battle diabetes, and I genuinely didn't want to end up like them with so many complications, particularly losing my eyesight or extremities. I'm an artist. I need my eyes. I need my hands. So I thought about it, then I thought about it some more. 6 months later, I gave in, but not before asking why a gastric bypass. They explained that if I got the procedure, I could potentially reverse my diabetes, control my hypertension without medication, and even treat my intracranial hypertension. I asked how, and they basically told me that what happens is that when the surgery is done, your whole body resets, and if your diabetes diagnosis was less than 5 years old, there was a 90% chance to get it into remission. Let me preface this by saying that I was never addicted to food. I just never paid attention to the amount of calories I consumed. I would eat 3 meals a day, but then have a bag of chips and a soda with lunch. One meal alone would end up being 1,000 calories. I was consuming between 3,000 and 4,000 daily just to maintain my weight. You never know where those extra calories can sneak up on you, so I wasn't overeating. I was just eating very poorly. Although I will admit that I did become mildly addicted to energy drinks and salted sunflower seeds in the last couple of years before my hospitalization, which likely contributed to my diabetes and worsened my blood pressure due to all the salt I was consuming. I was honestly still scared of going through with the surgery because of the risk of death during the process. But it came down to either potentially dying on the operating table quickly or dying slowly and painfully over the years. So I made the hardest decision I've ever had to make in my life and went under the knife May 29th, 2021. I'm not going to say it was easy. I had a panic attack before I went into the operating room. And I still remember the first thing I thought when I woke up was, what did I do? I had an emotional breakdown in recovery, but my assigned therapist came immediately to talk to me. She helped me calm down and helped me realize that what I did was to save my life. She assured me that she would be there to hold my hand every step of the way. After so many failures in trying to lose weight, if I didn't succeed this time, I might have given up on life entirely. Bariatric surgery is not a magic wand that makes you instantly skinny. It's a long road of hard work. However, I was given a powerful tool to help me walk that road. While it didn't seem that way at first, I wouldn't have been able to do it without a whole team of doctors, nutritionists, and even a specialized therapist to support me on this challenging process. I did what they told me to do and ate what they asked me to eat. I shared my trauma and failures with them, and they told me that if I trust the process and followed their guidance, then I should be on the right track to losing the weight. When you have a gastric bypass, you have to learn to eat again. It's a lengthy process to get used to. Many people fail after getting this surgery because they don't follow their doctor's instructions to the letter. I decided there and then, if this were to fail, it wouldn't be because of me. I paid a very high price emotionally, physically, and monetarily for this opportunity, and I wasn't going to waste it like last time. My life was on the line. I was taking medication to control my diabetes and hypertension, but just 2 weeks after my surgery, I had to stop taking them because they were causing me issues. My hypertension had regulated in that short time, and it was actually causing very low blood pressure. I also stopped taking the medication for my diabetes because I almost fainted one day due to low blood sugar. The surgery had delivered on its promise in a very small amount of time. My diabetes went into remission, and that was already a win. Now I was only having to take the supplements that my body needed, as a gastric bypass limits the amount of nutrients your body absorbs. It was something I had to come to terms with. I would have to take these supplements for the rest of my life. But honestly, I think it's a good compromise, trading prescription medications for just vitamin supplements. Something I didn't expect to be told was that I needed to start exercising, because if I didn't do cardio and weight training at the same time, my muscles would atrophy. You not only lose fat with the process, but also muscle mass. So add another layer of fear to Leona's already overwhelmed mind, and it served as motivation enough to start. I began going to the gym as soon as I got my vaccine in June, and have been going every day since then, putting my all into it. I just did what had to be done and set aside my emotions while there. I had to make this work because, again, my life depended on it. Month after month, I found myself amazed at what my body could do physically. With the help of that workout app, I had a clear routine. I didn't need a trainer to tell me what to do. Little by little, I could do more and more things that honestly I was never able to do prior to this. Then something strange started to happen. I began to enjoy working out. It seemed like a lifetime ago that I had a panic attack just stepping into the gym. I looked forward to my me time, and the moment I knew I was doing something right was when I saw the change in my strength, energy, and stamina. And while I saw the scale go down on my side, you, on the other side of the screen, would see my face change right before your eyes. Many people started to notice and ask questions, but I wasn't ready to acknowledge it publicly. I never called my process a quote-unquote weight loss journey. I just thought of it as something that I needed to do if I didn't want to die. I was afraid that the attention on my channel would be the wrong kind. I was worried that I'd end up like another Amber Lynn Reed or a Nikocado Avocado train wreck getting hate views. My process was personal, and I didn't want to share it publicly out of fear of failing again. On top of being overly critical of myself, I could not have handled strangers' comments on my own failure. I've done that all my life, and I didn't need help from strangers pointing that out. I was unsure whether to show my face on my channel for the longest time. That's why all my old videos have little avatar animations. I was trying to avoid negative comments about my weight. We all know that on the internet, if you're not conventionally attractive, nobody likes you. But I wanted to fully express myself without the limitations of an animation. So I took the chance and I started showing myself, hoping that people would want to follow me for my work and not for my looks. To my surprise, I only received a handful of hate comments, and I never took offense to them. I was like, congratulations, you have eyes. So little by little, that fear of appearing on camera eased up. Then I received a message from someone on Facebook. Part of that message read, "Maybe this is weird, but as another plus-size gal, it really means a lot to me to see you on camera in this hobby." Out of all the comments I ever received, this was the only one I actually took offense to. I received this message right around the time I was diagnosed with diabetes, and I did not take it at all as a compliment. This person could have said, as one girl to another, "It's great to see more female representation in this male-dominated hobby." That would have been an amazing compliment. But to literally tell me that you're following my channel because I was plus size, that felt like an insult to me. My content shouldn't be followed because of my weight, but for my actual work. Appearances shouldn't matter, and that's what I thought. I was completely unaware of the body positive and the fat acceptance movement up until maybe 2 years ago, right around the time I had my surgery. What I saw appalled me. With my lifetime of poor mental health and recent medical emergency, I couldn't believe what these young women were advocating for. My lifespan was threatened because I let my weight get uncontrolled, and I knew what that led to. To see these people promoting such a lifestyle, I felt sorry for them because they're living a lie. They claim they feel great and that their blood work comes back just fine. And that's what I said in my 20s. I felt fine. But as soon as I hit my mid-30s, everything came crashing down. And these people are in for a rude awakening if they get to live that long. I understand these women. I felt like that all my life. I sought validation by getting attention from the opposite sex, being self-deprecating, and always pointing out that I was fat and I knew it. I did this so that it would deter people from saying the same things I heard all my life. They're seeking validation by posting these delusional ideas on an app that appears to cater to creating echo chambers for this group of people. The analogy of crabs in a bucket comes to my mind every time I see them get upset over someone they know losing weight, like their reactions to Adele's weight loss, for example. With comments like the one I received from this girl, I remember watching a video from Michelle McDaniel reacting to a video where people on TikTok were saying that you should follow more plus-size women regardless of what they create. I didn't want people who didn't care for my work to follow me just for that reason, and I realized how messed up that community was. I will say that seeing people ask me if I was sick because I was losing weight came across as a little rude. I was definitely sick, but I was sick because I was obese. So seeing people say, I hope she's not losing weight because she's sick, kinda rubbed me the wrong way. I never thought that if someone was losing weight, it'd be because of illness. But some close friends did tell me that it's something that happens, so I guess being worried that I may have been losing weight because of that was fair enough. Although I will say that I found it extremely hilarious that the new way to say, you lost weight, was to say, you look healthy. Really? My 15-year-old self would never believe how society has changed nowadays. I honestly would have thought it was a little ridiculous, but hey, times change, I guess. Little by little, I would look into the mirror and see someone I hadn't seen in a good 20 years. There were moments when I would side-eye my reflection, still afraid to look at it directly, and see that Leona that I had missed so much. At one point, I even said out loud, "There you are. Where have you been?" As if I had just seen a long-lost friend for the first time. I reached the point where I could see the old me, the me that my mind remembered so well, even when I was at my highest weight. When I finally saw myself, it made me want to look at pictures from the last 2 decades. And I can tell you that I did not recognize the person in those photos. It was as if I wasn't living in that body. I remember those moments captured in video and photos, but I don't remember experiencing them. The only way I can explain the feeling is by referencing the movie Click. You remember whenever Adam Sandler's character didn't want to experience the moment, he just clicked the fast forward button? It was exactly like that, but in real life. You'd think, how is that possible? You literally see yourself all the time in your videos. But no, I became numb to my appearance whenever I filmed and edited my videos. I did the same thing as before. I just didn't look at myself. Our minds work in very bizarre and complex ways to protect our psyche. And mine did just that. I also remember feeling extremely angry and sad at the same time because I felt that I had wasted 2/3 of my life and missed out on so many life experiences because I wasn't there mentally. I started to feel a lot of regret. Like, if I had known what I know now, my life would be completely different. But I didn't. And I had to come to terms with the fact that there were a lot of things that I couldn't control that led to me being here. From trauma to consequences I brought upon myself by my actions. My past self was a very damaged girl. A girl that was thrown into the world with some of the worst cards to play life with. That anger slowly turned to empathy, and I felt that I needed to forgive her. Years of therapy finally helped me see things in a different light. I hugged that lonely, broken child and that unbelievably hurt young woman. They are both part of me, and I now have the capacity to give them both peace, letting them live inside my heart. As my emotional scale became balanced, the physical scale stopped moving when I reached a year into my process. I went from 130 kilos down to 86, and for months, it stayed that way. I was nowhere near where I started, but I still felt like an obese person. Losing that much weight carries a heavy price. I went from a lifetime of hating my body to being ashamed of it in less than a year because I was left with so much excess skin. I knew before I had my bypass that there was a high possibility of ending up with it, but I never imagined that it would be that much. I went from being self-conscious of my rolls to being self-conscious of my hanging skin that I would desperately try to hide, especially on camera. It looked horrible, and it was a daily reminder of what I had done to my body, the damage I did to it. I was still pretty angry at my past self for letting it get that bad. Why didn't I make the change earlier and sooner? It made me cry every time I saw myself in the mirror. I was wearing a meat shield, that I no longer needed. What was once armor had become my prison, because all this time I was afraid of getting catcalled or harassed if I lost the weight again. But when that didn't happen, I realized that I didn't need it anymore. I wanted freedom. I had the face I remember having, but not the body I used to know. I was fit for the first time in my life. I became strong, healthy, and felt physically amazing, full of energy. However, the excess skin was not only hindering my daily activities, because running and certain exercises were painful, but there was also the risk of infection. And to top it off, it was also affecting me psychologically. When my year post-op follow-up came, I asked my doctor what I was doing wrong, and I was basically told that the scale wasn't going down because I had reached my goal. The extra weight I had was just from the excess skin. I couldn't believe it. I never really had a clear numeric goal. I just wanted to be healthy. When I was told I had gotten there, I felt like I was nowhere near finished. The doctors were like, "You made it. You reached the finish line." But I still wanted to keep running because that wasn't what I imagined. So it was time to look into skin removal surgery for the sake of both my physical and mental health. I was recommended a very good surgeon, but I was terrified of what recovery would look like. I had seen some episodes from a series called Skin Tight, and seeing these people suffer so much through their own recovery made me very nervous about undergoing surgery. I had also come to terms with the fact that I would need to exchange the excess skin for scars because I needed extensive work. But my surgeon knew what he was doing, and I only heard positive things about him. When I had my evaluation, he made me feel very comfortable and explained everything to me. He helped me calm down, and especially helped me with my fear of pain. He guaranteed that I would feel minimal pain because they would take care of that for me. I was told that I would need several surgeries and it would be a long process, so I had to mentally prepare myself for another long road ahead of me. But I was finally seeing the end, whereas before it was still very blurry. With the help of my boyfriend, we managed to start saving up for my surgeries. I had to pay out of pocket because there's no such thing as insurance like what the US has. We can get it, but it only covers emergencies and doesn't cover elective surgeries. It was less expensive compared to US prices, but it's still expensive by Mexican standards. So I booked my first surgery and set it for June 2022. But one of the requirements to be admitted to the hospital was to bring in a negative COVID test. And wouldn't you know it, after 2 years of not getting the virus, tragedy struck 2 weeks before my surgery, and I caught it. Although it felt like a mild cold, that meant that my surgery was now at risk of being canceled. I have spent several months mentally preparing myself for this, and I was exhausted and I just wanted to get it over with. But now I had to wait, and I waited. So when I took a third PCR test and it still came back as positive, I was fucking devastated. My surgery needed to be postponed, and I cried myself to sleep that day. I was so close, but still so far. Thankfully, I only had a week's delay after my negative test came back, and I was finally able to confirm my surgery in 3 days after that. The surgery lasted 5 hours, and this was just an abdominoplasty. I was told that they had removed 6 kilos of skin. I went in weighing 86 kilos, came out 80. I didn't have any pain. There was discomfort, but no pain whatsoever. I was discharged the same day and went home to start my recovery. I finally felt comfortable enough to share the news with you guys on my community tab because, well, the changes were more apparent by then, and I felt that it was time for me to acknowledge my weight loss to a certain extent to my subscribers and what I was going through, albeit still in a little cryptic way without really going into details. The amount of cheer I got brought me to tears. I was overwhelmed with the amount of positivity I was getting from complete strangers, and I realized that I was very lucky to have such support from fans. Only my patrons were in the loop of my personal matters when I went in for my gastric bypass. They were there with me since the start, so they knew what was up. Medical care in Mexico is very different from that in the US, so my experience might not be anywhere near what Americans experience. Something I noticed particularly in the US, doctors are hesitant or even downright refuse to provide strong painkillers to patients that undergo surgery. But here, it's a totally different world because doctors actually care for pain management. Plus, we don't have an opioid epidemic, so there's that. I had a very quick recovery, and even the surgeon was amazed at my progress. I didn't have any complications either. 3 weeks after my surgery, I was giving the green light to go back to the gym. And while I had a lot of swelling, day by day, I would see my body change. And something unexpected happened. I started to like myself. I liked what I saw in the mirror. I don't know when it happened, but after a lifetime, I was getting my self-esteem back. To see yourself with love is the strangest feeling in the world when all you felt for yourself was hatred. There's a sense of peace and healing, and I found the most valuable thing I had thought I lost forever. And while I didn't experience, at least not to this point, any type of sexual harassment, what I did experience was different treatment from people in general. They smiled at me. They were nice, especially at the grocery store. The same person who had cut my cold meats for the last year all of a sudden started to smile at me and make conversation, something they never did before. Not only did it make me uncomfortable, it really pissed me off because while many things have changed in the last 20 years, people still treat you differently when you're overweight. The discrimination is still there, maybe unconsciously, but it's still there because when I was overweight, nobody stepped out of their way to be nice to me. Nobody paid me attention. Now random women would stop just to tell me how pretty I looked? Like, excuse me? What? Did I just step into the Twilight Zone? What the fuck is this? I'm normal in society standards, and now people treat me with kindness? I hate it, and it makes me bitter just to think about it. That's the only thing I agree with the body positive movement. Society is full of shit when it comes to treating overweight people. I hate how all my life I was discriminated against. But as soon as I'm a normal weight, all of a sudden, I'm worthy of respect and basic human decency. It makes me want to tell society to fuck right off. These could just be pet peeves at this point. What really matters right now for me is that I'm finally happy, but most importantly, I'm healthy. The rest of the world could burn tomorrow and I wouldn't care. Well, maybe just a little. It took 9 months for me to be born, and it took me another 9 to be reborn, because that's how long it took to have all my surgeries. I had to have 4 total, but I'm one of the few people that apparently heal very quickly and with minimal pain. So I'm very lucky. I never knew my body would react that way to surgery, but now I know. And while my scars can be very visible, I'd rather much prefer to have them than all the excess skin I had. They will be scars left from a battle I almost lost, and I'll be here to tell the tale. The freedom I felt after having all that removed was immeasurable. I've never felt lighter in my life. Being liberated from a meat armor that had no use to me now is something that I don't have words to describe. The world now seems to offer me an infinite number of possibilities, with so many doors to open for me to explore. One of those doors led me to Anime Expo, believe it or not, where I could walk for 3 days straight without feeling tired or be in any type of pain, even amidst the crowds and long lines. It was as if people around me were moving in slow motion while I walked. I felt like I had wings. Through the day, I would do mental checks on my feet, and I never felt any discomfort. It was incredible. Just 3 years ago, I could have never imagined being able to walk just a couple of blocks without being in pain. And I still can't believe how much I now enjoy walking, and I seize every opportunity to do it. I never thought this day would come. I pretty much had given up after so many constant failures. But it wasn't until I was confronted with my own mortality that I truly stopped and decided to change. I couldn't have achieved this without the help and guidance of a team of specialists, from the surgeon who performed my bypass to the nutritionist who advised me on what, and more importantly, taught me how to eat, to my therapist that guided me through this entire process. Mental health is a key factor in breaking damaging cycles that hold you back from reaching success and overcoming trauma, enabling you to lead a genuinely happy life and make positive changes. You can't tell someone to lose weight if they don't want to. They have to come to that decision by themselves. Being told for years, "You're fat, you need to lose weight," didn't help me once. It didn't motivate me. In fact, it did the complete opposite. I felt like I was being attacked. Just as you can't force someone to go to therapy, they need to go because they want to. You can't force someone to lose weight. While you can express your concern, especially if you are very close to that person, that's about the extent of it. You also can't hound them about it every single time you see them. Many people, like me, are just tired of hearing it, and it doesn't help. You don't know what they're going through. You don't know if they're overweight because of trauma like me, or if they have an eating disorder. All you can do is be there for them. If you have the mental strength to listen to them complain about the same things over and over, which is another issue on in itself. There's only so much you can do before you stop caring, and I totally get that. Ultimately, the person needs to make the change. Nobody else can do it for them, just like I had to. You also can't achieve lasting weight loss by hopping from one fad diet to another. What's required is a complete lifestyle change, a permanent one. You can't simply do Slim Fast, Nutrisystem, diet pills, eat salads, eliminate everything, lose some weight, and then return to your previous eating habits, only to gain it all back. You need to learn how to eat in a balanced way, alongside a calorie deficit. I didn't grow up with this knowledge, and had I known, I probably wouldn't be where I am today. I'm no expert. I don't intend for my words to be taken as advice because I'm not a certified specialist. I'm sharing this because it's what I've learned the hard way. I hope more people come to realize this and make changes without resorting to extreme measures like surgery to save their lives. There's still time to do it. It's been an incredibly long road, one I never thought I would ever see finished. I'm grateful to be alive today to share my story. Maybe you're going through something similar or know someone dealing with obesity and mental health issues. If my experience could inspire at least one person to make a change, even with someone like me with a history of so many failures, then I'll be extremely happy. If I could do it, so can you. But you can't do it alone. You need a strong support system guided by your doctors and therapists. My boyfriend was there with me through the entire process, and I wouldn't have been able to do it without his help. He was a true team player and stood by my side through thick and thin. No pun intended. I am eternally grateful that the universe brought him into my life. But if you didn't really care to listen to my story and you're just here to see me paint a pretty resin figure, that's perfectly fine too. I never want to be obese again. I don't want to return to a state of misery, unhealthiness, and the prospect of a shortened life due to illness. I paid a heavy price for something that most people take for granted. I mean, I have close to 150 unpainted kits in my closet. I need to at least paint half before I die, and I don't want that to happen anytime soon. My whole life has changed. And if you had told me how much just 2 years ago, I would have never believed you. To those who are in the shoes that I was wearing not too long ago, I have one thing to say to you. I believe in you, but you also need to believe in yourself to make a change. I love you all, and thank you so much for your concern, and thank you even more for the incredible support and celebration for my success. I'm excited for what life has in store for me now, and the rest, as they say, is history.